Talent matters more than ever. During COVID, there was the great resignation. Employees quit en masse. Rates went up. This tends to happen during pandemics, incidentally. Look, hiring only seems easy if you haven't had to do it recently. We've done some research on this, and the hardest roles to fill in IT are usually in the areas of security, enterprise architecture, senior leadership, business intelligence, and applications development. The vast majority of hiring managers for roles like these are having at least moderate difficulty filling them. So the real question is, how can you get this right? Because it does matter. Workforce planning matters. Don't take it from me.
I think if you don't do workforce planning, you're gonna have a lesser understanding of what you actually need the people to do. You're gonna have lesser understanding of the holistic picture around what our strategy is, what business needs from us, what we need to maintain, and what we have. And so you'll continue in sort of a state of chaos or state of firefighting, um, because you'll be dealing with things as they come up instead of looking at it as a holistic picture, right? Oftentimes, yes, people leave sort of on short terms or they go on leave because there's a medical emergency, things like that. But oftentimes there are predictors around that, or we can at least make sure we are set up to succeed in the event that it happens. So it's about pre-thinking. It's about being more proactive and strategic about how we're planning for those changes and looking at the environment that we're in.
The stats vary by industry, but you can expect 70% of your operating costs to be related to your workforce. So mistakes, especially frequent and bad mistakes, will eat into your profitability if that's what you're trying to do, or gum up the works of your mission. There are a few barriers that make it difficult to get this right. There's talent availability. The reality is that many of the roles in our hard-to-fill list are hard to fill because they're hard to do. It takes years of experience and specialist knowledge to become a security expert or enterprise architect. Would you trust an executive leader who hasn't demonstrated at least some leadership qualities in a different role? When you introduce these requirements, the pool gets dramatically shallower. You'll have a hard time finding people and an even harder time affording them. That's not to say it's impossible. We just have to be creative.
I would say there are good people that we can find. But what we tend to do is we don't use good information to find them. So when we're making the decision to actually hire, we're using, outdated or faulty information, or just leaning on what we've done in the past to fill that role.
In addition, a globalizing talent marketplace in the form of remote work opens up opportunities, but it also complicates things just a tad. There might be some retrenchment on this front due to macroeconomic trends, but it's safe to say that outsourcing is at least technically easier than ever. It's harder to justify wages based on geography now that talent is far more mobile. That can make it harder to fill a position when applicants in your local market can look elsewhere without too much difficulty.
One of the challenges I know that remote work brings is to some of our members who can only hire in a particular area. So maybe they're government, and so they can only hire people within their region, or they are hybrid. They want their team to be hybrid workers, and so someone coming from a million miles away doesn't make sense, and so it makes it a lot more challenging because I think because these people have options. They don't have to. They could be living right next to the office. They don't have to come and work in your office. They can go work somewhere across the world remotely. So yeah, that does make it a lot more challenging for people to hire the staff that they're looking for.
As the pandemic recedes into memory, this reality will probably shift, but important expectations have no doubt been set. Another barrier is unsustainable salary increases for in-demand specialists. I made a TikTok about it. For most enterprise IT employees, this isn't a critical issue, but for a lot of technical specialists, wages have gone way, way, way up. The most extreme example is probably AI talent. Bloomberg reported that Meta poached an Apple employee for a multi-year pay package worth well over $200 million. Maybe that's sustainable for Meta, but for most companies, this type of talent will be out of reach. Ditto to the extreme for governments and nonprofits, who often struggle to pay even a thousandth of that figure for a given year. This can become a crisis, especially if you're facing macroeconomic headwinds or if your salary offerings are fixed by statute or inflexible HR rules. Not all roles grow in demand at the same pace, and this is a real issue if you've got a grid. And finally, it can take a long time to hire. Even if you've got all your ducks in a row, it can still take time to fill a role. The opportunity costs are tremendous. When a role is unfilled, there is value left on the table. If there isn't, why are you even trying to fill it? So it's kind of urgent by definition, isn't it? And there are other things to worry about too: generalized financial pressure, the fact that hiring might not be the fastest or most cost-effective way to fill a skill gap, and the need for an exact replacement for an employee that's left, unicorn syndrome. Ultimately, a complete workforce plan is about more than just hiring people to get the job done. It's about hiring, sure, but that's not the only path.
We talk about hiring, training, outsourcing, and contracting um, in the blueprint. So each of those are legitimate strategies. When we decide which one we want to use, we're looking at sort of characteristics of the need, and we're also looking at the state of the marketplace. So how urgent is the role? How critical is the need? Is it, sort of a novelty? Do we have any of that available internally? And how durable is it? So how is it a long-term, long-standing role, or is it sort of a project-based situation? And then the state of the marketplace is, are the skills out there? How scarce are they? Can we afford them? Or do we have some aspect of preparedness internally? So a little bit of internal marketplace and external marketplace. So if you're needing sort of a really specialized skill and there's a really high urgency for that, that role isn't necessarily core to a business goal, then you're probably going to maybe look to consulting because you can get that quickly, but you're going to pay for that. If internal talent isn't available and it is a core role and the skills that you need are available, then you might go to market for that.
It's about building a business case for your decisions, and it's about aligning skill combinations with your organizational needs. Fortunately, we can help you.
In the blueprint, we break it down into 3 sort of practical and tactical phases: defining the workforce demand, identifying your workforce supply, and then building and deploying that workforce plan. So looking at it in those 3 phases, ultimately you're going through figuring out your scope and collecting the information sources that you need for your workforce demand. So you might be talking to business, you might be talking to employees, you might be likely looking at your IT strategy. We recommend you've sort of got an understanding of your organizational structure and that you have good data. So maybe you're doing like our IT staffing diagnostic to get actual capacity and capability data. And you're essentially going through estimating what that equivalent is in IT demand for your team. Into phase 2, you're looking then at refining the supply gap and identifying the critical gaps. So you're not necessarily doing a workforce plan for every single role in your organization. You might identify critical roles, and this could also bring in employee data into that. So any turnover, if you have a high number of upcoming retirements potentially, things like that. So just really refining what your supply is, and then applying that to identifying those critical gaps that you need to fill, and then building that out and deploying that in the 3rd phase.
Building a workforce plan can seem daunting, but you can do it effectively in 3 parts. As Heather said, the first is all about your workforce projections. It might seem intuitive to backfill vacancies. You've got headcount, fill it, but that might not be the best or most effective use of your time. You should take the opportunity to think about what you need based on your overall IT strategy and your stakeholder needs. That's the demand part of the equation. Use our workforce analysis automation workbook to highlight demand across the various IT areas: applications, infrastructure, data, security, that sort of thing. This is a pretty intensive exercise, but it's well worth it. Otherwise, you're trying to find your way in the dark. You'll populate your roles, headcount, and employee information. Then you'll input functional information, task information, and the details of each task. Is it done for innovation purposes, to keep the lights on? Who's responsible for it? Is it done at the user level? By whom? Indefinitely? At what cadence? How much work is necessary? That sort of thing. Supply matters too, of course. It's an equation with multiple parts. You'll have to understand your turnover, usually expressed as a percentage, your average time to hire, and the amount of time it takes a newly hired person to get up to speed. It's generally not instant, even with experienced hires. Now, this is easy to overlook and can change your calculations, sometimes significantly. Once you understand what you're likely to need, it becomes time to analyze the data you have in front of you. This is expressed as a table in the tool, and you can see where you're in deficit and in what roles. Of course, supply is more than just available FTEs, so you'll have to watch out for that as well. People don't generally hit 100% productivity for a variety of very good reasons, so you want to account for that as you take stock of your actual supply. This exercise should make gaps apparent. And once you know them, you can resolve them using our talent sourcing workbook to figure out the most effective way to solve your problem. Hint, it's probably not backfilling. You can train someone, engage a vendor, hire a contractor, or some combination of these instead of backfilling, and you should explore it. Once you've got all this done, you can build a workforce plan that covers staffing, communications, and metrics. Clarify where you're going to get your skills and present the logic to your stakeholders. Outline how resources will be allocated, to what team and for what purpose, and then provide a justification for your decisions. If you can't trace a decision back to your business goals, should you really be making it? Communication is critical.
If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So you need to have a clear understanding of what your strategy is, what you're trying to achieve, what your organization is trying to achieve. Partly so that you can make sure that you're asking for the right resources, and also partly so that you can make sure that you're actually enabling the business in the way that you need to. So you need to do some analysis, understand what your strategy is. Is your organization looking for you to move more into AI? Are they trying to meet a particular business goal that perhaps you don't have today? What are those things that you need to do? That needs to be built into your workforce strategy so that you can ask for the right resources and be able to achieve that. In order to be successful, you do need to make sure that you understand, yes, where you're going and what's needed, but you also need to be able to communicate that, whether that's to your leadership so that you can request the resources that are required. But it's also, you need to clearly communicate to your colleagues that you're going down the right path and you truly are enabling business. You don't want to be just requesting funds without being clear about what that's leading to and how that's enabling your organization, how that's helping you to grow in the direction that you need to grow into.
On the communication side, you'll want to clarify the reporting cadence. Who needs to be informed of what? When? Then you'll need to develop a communication strategy and share that with your stakeholders. If you propose a strategic change without buy-in from anyone else, you'll be an army of one, and unless you're a tyrannical CEO, that probably won't work, and even then. Finally, you'll want to make sure that you've got the right metrics in place. A metric, remember, is simply a proxy for something that you care about. Some are better than others. You'll want to align metrics with performance as key performance indicators, and then you should use those metrics to highlight the impact of the data-driven workforce planning process that you've undertaken. If you do it, and nobody knows you've done anything, well, you've not done a very good job demonstrating value, have you? As with other reporting, you should set up a cadence that is appropriate for your audience. Here are some examples of metrics you might wish to track and things that you should think about.
A lot of them are going to be sort of housed in HR most likely, but they would be things that an IT leader would have insight into as well. So sometimes we're trying to reduce the headcount, so either a reduction in a headcount or an increase in a headcount. So total number of IT employees is often something we would be measuring. We can also look at, if we're doing a lot of training, maybe it's the cost of training around that per employee. One that doesn't get considered as often, but we might want to look at overtime, if anybody keeps track of that anymore, or average hours billed, things like that, can give you insights into, have we reduced all the excess work? So are we actually resourced properly related to the work that we need to get done?
We'll leave you with a couple of key insights. Your workforce plan is more than just a projected headcount. It must consider work efficiency and talent sourcing. These factors come together into your own workforce equation. Infotech helps you automate the analysis so you can account for all the factors and data that will determine your success. A workforce plan is only as good as the goals it supports and the data it builds on. Reactively backfilling vacant roles will only perpetuate your status quo, causing you to fall behind as the needs of your business change. Ensure your workforce plan is built on accurate, up-to-date inputs that include your IT strategy and associated success metrics so that the plan you build can deliver maximum business value. When a skill gap appears, don't rush to hire into it. Understanding the best way to fill skill gaps, whether by hiring, outsourcing, or training, is a critical part of managing your limited workforce resources. Take factors such as the longevity of the skill need, your need for its round-the-clock availability, and its criticality to the business to determine the optimal way to fill the gap.